You want to build a home in regional Queensland. You've found the land, you've talked to a builder, you think you know the numbers. But before a single brick gets laid, before the slab is poured, before the frame goes up, Tablelands Regional Council hands you a bill for $36,670. That's not construction. That's not materials. That's a council infrastructure charge, and on some dwelling categories it just went up 74.6% overnight. I know that sounds like a misprint. It's not. As of September 1st, 2025, the council raised its charges to the maximum level allowed by the Queensland State Government, and 5 towns inside that council boundary are now carrying the full weight of that decision. This isn't something Zillow flags. It's not in the builder's quote. It doesn't show up on Realtor-style listings when you're browsing land packages online. Infrastructure charges sit in a council schedule, buried inside planning documents most buyers never read until they're already committed. The Tablelands Regional Council publishes the schedule. It's on their website. But the people most likely to be hit by it are first home buyers and young families who have never heard the term infrastructure charge in their lives. And this isn't one isolated council doing something unusual. Councils across Queensland have the legislative power to set charges up to a state-mandated cap. What changed on September 1st, 2025 in the Tablelands is that the council decided to use all of it. 5 towns, 1 council boundary, the same charge applied to every single new home, regardless of lot size, regardless of location within the council area, regardless of whether the buyer is building in a dense subdivision or on a rural block 6 times bigger. The number doesn't move. What moves is what it costs you relative to everything else you're already paying. The council named it themselves. That's the part worth holding on to. When Tablelands Regional Council voted to raise infrastructure charges to the state maximum, effective September 1st, 2025, Councillor Kevin Cardew stood up and explained publicly why the increases were justified. And the justification he gave was specific. The sewerage and water treatment infrastructure needed renewal, he said, especially in the Atherton area. Not the Tablelands broadly, not regional Queensland generally, Atherton specifically. The council's own elected representative put the town's name on the reason the fees had to rise. Atherton is the regional centre of the Tablelands, population sitting around 7,724, which makes it the largest town in this part of far north Queensland by a significant margin. It's got the shops, the hospital. Atherton Hospital is the main regional medical facility for the entire council area, the schools, the services. If you're moving to the Tablelands to build rather than buy, Atherton is almost certainly where you're looking first. It's the hub. Which is also exactly why the infrastructure under it is under the most pressure. Under the new schedule, anyone building a 3-bedroom or larger home in the Tablelands council area now pays $36,670 in council infrastructure charges before construction begins. That figure is up from $22,500, a jump of 63% in a single revision. For a 1-bedroom dwelling, the charge went from $15,000 Australian to $26,193, a rise of 74.6%. Those are the council's own numbers, published in the infrastructure charges schedule at trc.qld.gov.au. There's no ambiguity about what changed or when it changed. Now layer that onto the actual cost of building. Queensland's average new house build cost sits around $450,806, according to a realestate.com.au advice page. Add the post-September 2025 Tablelands Council charge of $36,670 for a home with more than 3 bedrooms, and you're already at $487,476 as a base build estimate. That number excludes land. It excludes site works. It excludes design fees. In Atherton, where land at Clear Mountain Estate is available from around $187,000 for lots ranging from 800 square metres to 1,132 square metres, according to openlot.com.au, you're looking at a total commitment that clears $674,000 before you've accounted for anything that happens on the ground between the lot and the finished house. The median house price in Atherton for the 12 months to April 2026 runs around $560,000 Australian, according to the realestate.com.au suburb profile. That's the price of an existing home. The cost of building a comparable new home in the same town, under the same council's new charge schedule, is already significantly higher than that median, which means the new build premium isn't just coming from construction costs or material prices. Part of it is now a fixed, upfront council levy that has no relationship to the size of the lot, the quality of the build, or the market value of the finished product. Sayar Karju was not quiet about his concern. "What concerns me," he told the Express in September 2025, "is that if we put these infrastructure costs up, the developer is only going to pass that charge on to the consumer." He was right to flag it. In a town where the infrastructure is already under documented pressure, where the council has publicly acknowledged that the sewerage and water treatment systems need funded renewal, the charge isn't theoretical. It's the price of catching up on decades of deferred maintenance, and someone has to absorb it. The drawback here is what the council itself said. The reason the charges had to rise is because the systems are already under strain. Building in Atherton from September 2025 onwards means paying to fix a problem that was accumulating before you arrived. The sewerage and water treatment infrastructure that serves the town needs work. The new charge is the mechanism for funding that work. Whether you think that's fair or not, it's the starting condition for anyone picking up a build permit in the Tablelands' largest town. What makes Atherton the right place to start this list is precisely that. The council didn't obscure what was happening. They named the town, explained the pressure, and raised the fee anyway. The transparency doesn't make the bill smaller, but it does make clear that this wasn't a bureaucratic accident. It was a deliberate decision, with a named justification, applied to the town where the consequences land hardest. If Atherton is where the official justification lives, Tolga is where you can watch the consequences play out in real time. The town sits roughly 45 kilometres southwest of Cairns CBD, close enough to attract buyers who want the Tablelands lifestyle without completely leaving the orbit of a major city, far enough that you're committed to regional living once you sign. Population around 3,177. And right now, in 2026, Panorama Views Estate is actively selling lots in both Stage 9 and Stage 10. That active subdivision is the critical detail. Every lot sold in Stage 9 or Stage 10 of Panorama Views from September 1st, 2025 onwards carries the full upgraded council infrastructure charge attached to any home built on it. Open Lot lists lots there ranging from 600 square metres to 1,064 square metres. The estate's own marketing describes stages as selling fast. The buyer who moves quickly on a Panorama Views lot is also, by definition, the buyer who absorbs the new fee in full, whether they know it or not before they sign. The median house price in Tolga for the 12 months to April 2026 sits around $692,000 Australian dollars, according to the realestate.com.au suburb profile. That's the highest existing home median of the 5 towns we're covering, except for Yungaburra. But the median reflects what's already been built and sold. The number that applies to anyone building new is the base build estimate, $487,476, which already folds in the $36,670 council charge before you add the cost of the land itself. On a Stage 9 or Stage 10 lot in Panorama Views, that land cost is additional. The estate markets lot prices separately. The infrastructure charge sits underneath, embedded in the economics of every new home before a single footing is dug. CR Kevin Cardew described the scenario almost exactly. He specifically raised the situation of first homebuyers and young people in the community. "We have a housing crisis here already," he told the Express. "We have first homeowners, young people in our community, and what this will do to them, their ability to buy their first block of land and build their first home, because the developer will pass these charges on to the consumer." That warning was delivered at the council meeting where the charges were voted through. The vote passed anyway. Think about who buys in a place like Tolga. It's not retirees cashing out Sydney apartments and looking for a sea change. It's families looking for land they can afford, young couples who have done the math on renting versus building, people who have decided that a 45-kilometre commute to Cairns is a reasonable trade-off for owning land that has space on it. Those are exactly the buyers CR Cardew was describing. And those are the buyers who will encounter the $36,670 line item in the developer's pricing, folded into the lot price, passed on exactly as the councillor predicted. The mechanism is straightforward. The developer pays the infrastructure charge to the council at the time of subdivision or building approval. The developer prices the charge into the lot or the house and land package. The buyer sees a total number. What the buyer doesn't necessarily see is that $36,670 of that total is a council levy that went up 63% 8 months ago. There is no line item in most sales contracts that says infrastructure charge increase effective September 2025. It's already in the price. Tolga's drawback is what it's always been for towns at this distance from a regional city. Services are local and limited. Specialist medical care, significant retail, the range of employment that comes with a city. All of that means a sustained drive. The 45-kilometre figure sounds manageable until you're doing it 3 times a week. That's the regional trade-off. What's new since September 2025 is that you now make that trade-off while also paying a council charge that didn't exist at its current level when the lots in Stage 8 were being marketed. Panorama Views Stage 9 and Stage 10 are the clearest real-world proof that the new fee regime isn't abstract. It's landing on specific lots, in a specific estate, being sold to specific buyers right now. Tolga is where the policy becomes a personal financial decision. You've just seen 2 towns where the infrastructure charge alone clears $36,670 before a brick is placed. One named by the council as the reason the fees had to rise. The other actively selling lots into the new regime right now. But there's a dimension the first 2 towns don't fully expose. In the next town, the same charge applies whether your lot is 600 square metres or more than 4,000 square metres. Rural buyer, suburban buyer, the council treats them identically. Someone tried to get that changed. The council left the door open, just barely. Picture the southern end of the Tablelands Plateau, the dairy country. Malanda Falls, one of the few permanently flowing waterfalls in far north Queensland, sits inside a national park at the edge of town. The air is cooler up here than on the coast. The land rolls wider, and if you're coming from a city, the scale of the rural blocks feels like a different category of property altogether. Malanda's population sits around 2,000 people. It's not a suburb, it's a small rural town with a specific character, and the buyers looking at land here are looking for space. They're looking at Malanda Views estate, where lots start from 4,000 square metres. 4,000 square metres. To put that in context, a standard suburban lot in a coastal Queensland subdivision runs somewhere between 400 and 600 square metres. A Malanda Views lot is more than 6 times that size. A Stage 9 lot in Panorama Views in Tolga is 600 to 1,064 square metres. The buyer coming to Malanda is buying something fundamentally different, a rural block, with the setbacks and the space and the lifestyle that come with it. And yet the council infrastructure charge is identical. $36,670 for a 3-bedroom home. No adjustment for lot size, no rural discount, no distinction between the buyer on a 600 square metre suburban lot and the buyer on a 4,000 square metre rural one. The Tablelands Regional Council's infrastructure charge schedule applies uniformly across the council area. The charge funds sewerage, water treatment and associated infrastructure. Whether your rural lot connects to those systems with the same intensity as an urban lot is a separate question, one the council's fee schedule doesn't ask. The median house price in Malanda for the 12 months to April 2026 comes in around 575,000 Australian, according to the realestate.com.au suburb profile. The base new build estimate under the post-September 2025 regime sits at $487,476 before land, site works and design. That estimate already includes the $36,670 council charge. A Malanda Views lot starts from rates that reflect the rural scale. Add the build estimate, add the lot, and you're assembling a number that reflects not just the cost of building, but the cost of building inside a council boundary that now charges at the state maximum. C.R. Cardew, who has been the most publicly vocal elected member on this issue, left open an exit. At the same council meeting where the charges were voted through, he said, "I'd like to think that if a review clearly demonstrates that we have done the wrong thing, and we have severely hampered development in our area because of it, we would have the fortitude to reduce it." That conditional is important. It means the current charge level is not necessarily permanent. It means there's a review mechanism. But it also means that for everyone building in Malanda between now and that hypothetical review, the charge stands at $36,670. No revision has been announced. The approximately 52-kilometre distance from Malanda to Cairns CBD is the drawback that defines daily life here. Specialist medical appointments, significant shopping, the kind of services that come with a city of Cairns' size. All of that is a sustained drive. The Atherton Hospital is the closest major regional facility, and it's closer than Cairns, but Atherton Hospital is itself operating under documented infrastructure pressure, which is why the council raised the fees in the first place. There's a circularity here that is worth naming. The infrastructure that needs funding is the same infrastructure that rural Malanda buyers are being charged to upgrade, even though the pressure on those systems comes primarily from the more densely populated northern towns. The rural buyer in Malanda is, in effect, cross-subsidising the infrastructure renewal that CR Cardew explicitly identified as an Atherton area problem. That's what a uniform charge across a council area does. It averages the cost. It pools the liability. Whether you're building on a 600 square metre urban lot near the pressure point, or on a 4,000 square metre rural block 52 kilometres from Cairns, the line item is the same, $36,670, due before construction begins. Malanda is the town where the structure of the charge becomes visible in a way the first two towns don't fully reveal. In Atherton and Tolga, the charge is large, but at least the infrastructure those towns are paying for is, at least partially, local. In Malanda, you're buying 6 times the land, you're 52 kilometres from the regional centre, and you're paying the same fee as someone building in the middle of the council's most pressured urban area. Yungaburra is different from the other 4 towns in a way that changes the character of the charge entirely. The town is heritage listed. It sits on the edge of Lake Tinaroo, a reservoir created by the Barron River Dam, and the combination of the lake setting, the historic streetscape, and the cooler Tablelands climate has made it the kind of place people actively seek out. Not just a town someone ends up in, but a destination. Population around 1,272, which makes it the smallest of the 5 towns we're covering, and it carries the highest median house price of all of them. The median house price in Yungaburra for the 12 months to April 2026 sits around $775,000 Australian dollars, according to the realestate.com.au suburb profile. That's the peak of this list, and there are 2 active land estates selling into that market right now. Yungaburra Waterfront Estate is selling lots ranging from 700 to 753 square metres, with prices from $385,000 Australian dollars. Yungaburra Village Estate Stage 8 is selling larger lots of 800 to 850 square metres, starting from $290,000 Australian dollars. Both are active, both are marketing now, and every buyer in both estates who builds a 3-bedroom home from September 2025 onwards pays the full $36,670 council infrastructure charge on top of the lot price. Let's do the arithmetic on the waterfront estate buyer. You pay $385,000 Australian dollars for the lot. That's the entry price, the cheapest lot listed at the time of research. You then pay $36,670 in council infrastructure charges before construction starts. Then you pay the construction cost, which on the Queensland average comes to around $450,806 before site works and design. That's a total commitment north of $872,000 Australian dollars before the keys are cut, before the site is cleared, before any of the bespoke costs that come with building on a heritage-adjacent block near a lake. The $36,670 charge, in isolation, doesn't look catastrophic against that scale, but it's not in isolation. It's stacked on top of the highest land prices in the council area, and it's mandatory before a single approval is issued. Here's the detail that stays with you. The council infrastructure charge for a 3-bedroom build in Yungaburra, $36,670, is more than the outright purchase price of some lots in Australian regional towns. Not distressed listings, not semi-abandoned inland towns, but functioning regional properties. The charge that Tablelands Regional Council collects before construction starts in its most sought-after heritage village exceeds what some Australians pay for the land itself in other parts of the country. I'm not saying that to alarm anyone. I'm saying it because it's a real number, sourced from the council's own published schedule, and it reframes what infrastructure charge actually means in this context. The heritage character of Yungaburra creates an additional layer of practical complexity that doesn't show up in the infrastructure charge schedule, but absolutely shows up in the build process. Heritage-adjacent construction typically involves additional planning approvals, potential design constraints, and longer approval timelines. None of that is reflected in the 36,670 Australian laws. That charge is just the council's cut before you engage with any of those considerations. The heritage character that makes the town worth 775,000 Australian in median house price is also the environment inside which you have to navigate every subsequent step of the build. The drawback for Yungaburra is the same as for the rest of the council area, approximately 44 kilometres southwest of Cairns CBD, with the same regional service ceiling that applies to all 5 towns. The lake, the heritage streetscape, the cooler temperatures, they're real, and they're why people pay $775,000 Australians for existing homes here. But the nearest major hospital is Atherton, and Cairns Base Hospital is a sustained drive. The town's attraction is environmental and aesthetic, its limitations are logistical. What Yungaburra reveals about the infrastructure charge that the previous 3 towns don't is this. The charge is flat. It doesn't scale with the value of the property. It doesn't adjust for the desirability of the location. $36,670 is $36,670 whether you're building in Atherton on a modest block or in Yungaburra on a waterfront lot worth nearly $400,000. For the Yungaburra buyer, the charge is a smaller proportion of the total transaction, closer to 4.7% of the town's median house price. But the total transaction is also the most expensive one in the council area. You're paying the most for the land and then the same fixed levy as everyone else. 2 active estates, lots selling now, waterfront and village blocks commanding the highest prices in the Tablelands, and every single one of them carries the same council charge that a first home buyer on a 600 square metre lot in a Tolga subdivision is paying. The flat structure of the charge treats a heritage lakeside estate and a regional suburb as equivalent infrastructure burdens. The council's accounting says they are. The market, paying $385,000 a trade postellias for a waterfront estate lot, says something more complicated. Every town so far has the same $36,670 charge underneath it, but they're all sitting on median house prices between $560,000 and $775,000. The charge hurts, but it lands on property that's worth something. The last town on this list has a median of $440,000. Same charge, smallest base. That means the fee represents 8.3% of the median house price. The council CEO had a direct response to that. You need to hear it. Ravenshoe sits at the southern edge of the Tablelands, higher in elevation than most of the towns on this list, cooler in temperature, and further from everything. Population around 1,332. Median house price for the 12 months to April 2026 comes in around 440,000 Australians, according to the realestate.com.au suburb profile, the lowest of the 5 towns we've covered. That last detail is the one that matters most for what comes next, because in Ravenshoe, the $36,670 infrastructure charge doesn't just add a fixed cost to a new build, it adds a proportional burden that is objectively heavier here than anywhere else in this council area. Run the numbers directly. In Yungaburra, where the median house price sits at 775,000 Australian dollars, the council infrastructure charge of $36,670 represents roughly 4.7% of that median value. In Atherton, at 560,000 Australians, the charge is around 6.5%. In Ravenshoe, at 440,000 Australians, that same $36,670 charge represents approximately 8.3% of the town's median house price. You're paying the same money, you're getting proportionally less house for it. The charge doesn't know, and doesn't care, that Ravenshoe is the most affordable town in the council area. It applies uniformly, and uniformity in this case is not the same as fairness. Think about what 8.3% means at the point of decision. A first home buyer looking at Ravenshoe has chosen it precisely because it's the most accessible entry point into the Tablelands market. $440,000 median, lower than Atherton, lower than Malanda, lower than Tolga, lower than Yungaburra. If you're trying to get into the property market on the Tablelands with limited capital, Ravenshoe is the logical starting point. And then you find out that the council infrastructure charge for building new, which you might be considering because existing stock is limited, is $36,670, mandatory, upfront, before construction. That charge eats 8.3% of your town's median value before you've ordered a single window frame. At the time of this research, no active new estate had been verified in Ravenshoe. That's a notable absence, given that the other 4 towns all have active subdivisions in various stages of sales. The absence of a verified active estate in the council's most affordable town raises a question the data doesn't answer directly. Is development in Ravenshoe moving more slowly because the economics are harder? The infrastructure charge doesn't change based on the local market. $36,670 is $36,670 in Ravenshoe, just as it is in Yungaburra. But in Ravenshoe, the gap between the charge and the underlying value of what you're building is wide enough to make the arithmetic difficult. The base new build estimate for a 3-bedroom home in this council area now sits at $487,476, and that figure already includes the $36,670 charge. It does not include land. In Ravenshoe, where the median house price is $440,000 Australian dollars, you are looking at a situation where the base cost of building a new 3-bedroom home, before the lot, before site works, before design, already exceeds the median price of an existing home in the same town by nearly $47,500 Australian dollars. You can build new in Ravenshoe, but the economics of doing so under the post-September 2025 charge schedule mean you will almost certainly spend more building than you would buying something already standing. That is the structural trap the new charge creates in the council's most affordable market. It doesn't price people out of Ravenshoe entirely, but it makes new construction, the kind of construction that adds housing supply to an already constrained market, progressively harder to justify on pure financial grounds. And it's worth remembering what Krim Cardew said. We have a housing crisis here already. A housing crisis in the town where the infrastructure charge bites hardest proportionally, with no verified active new estate and a build cost that already exceeds the median sale price of existing homes. Council CEO Dr. Nicholas Stepanov addressed the feasibility question directly and without softening it. This is not a tax, he said. Someone has to pay for the cost of infrastructure. And on the question of developers claiming the charges make projects unviable, ultimately, for developers, if a project is so unfeasible that this makes a difference, then the project is unfeasible in the first place. That's a clear institutional position. The council is not apologising for the charge level, and it's not offering concessions to projects that find the number difficult. If the math doesn't work, the CEO's position is that the math never worked. What that position doesn't address is what it means for the person who isn't a developer. The family in Ravenshoe who wants to build a home on a lot they've already bought. The couple who chose Ravenshoe specifically because it was the most affordable town in the council area, and assumed that building new would be a realistic path to ownership. Dr. Stepanov's framing applies cleanly to commercial development. It applies less cleanly to the individual who has already committed to the location and is now absorbing a charge that went up 63% on September 1st, 2025, with no advance warning embedded in the publicly visible listing data they use to make their decision. Ravenshoe's drawback is logistical in a way that compounds the financial pressure. The town sits roughly 52 kilometres by road from Atherton Hospital, the main regional medical facility for the entire council area. That's approximately a 44-minute drive each way for specialist or emergency care. Not impossible, not unusual for regional Queensland, but real. If you're building a life in Ravenshoe, you're accepting that urgent medical access requires distance, and you're accepting that the council infrastructure charge for the privilege of building in the most affordable, most isolated town in the area is exactly the same $36,670 Australia that Yungaburra's waterfront buyers are paying for lots near a heritage lake. The proportional hit in Ravenshoe is the most revealing number in this entire list because it strips away the variables. In Atherton, the charge pays for infrastructure the town demonstrably needs. In Tolga, it's attached to a fast-selling subdivision with obvious demand. In Malanda, it's applied uniformly to rural blocks in a way that raises genuine questions about cross-subsidisation. In Yungaburra, it's layered on top of the highest land prices in the council, where buyers have capacity to absorb it. In Ravenshoe, it's none of those things. It's just the same charge applied to the smallest economic base in a town where no active new estate is currently operating, at a moment when the CEO of the council has made clear that the charge level is not negotiable. The 8.3% figure isn't a complaint, it's a measurement. It tells you exactly how much of your town's median property value disappears into a council schedule before construction begins, in the place where construction is already the hardest to justify financially. Ravenshoe doesn't get a discount for being affordable. It doesn't get a discount for being isolated. It doesn't get a discount for being the furthest from the infrastructure pressure that the CEO and the councillors cited as the reason for the increase. It pays $36,670 Australian, exactly like everyone else. And that is precisely why it belongs at the end of this list. There's one more thing worth sitting with here. The charge for a one-bedroom dwelling, the smallest possible category, went from 15,000 Australian dollars to 26,193 Australians, a rise of 74.6%. In a town where housing affordability is already the tightest in the council area, even building small got dramatically more expensive overnight. The person trying to build a modest single-bedroom home in Ravenshoe, the smallest footprint, the lightest infrastructure demand, now pays $26,193 in council charges before anything else happens. In September 2024, that same person would have paid 15,000 Australian dollars. The difference is $11,193. That's not a rounding error. In Ravenshoe, at the bottom of the council's price scale, that's real money. The Tablelands isn't the only council in Queensland with the power to lift charges to the state ceiling. It's the one that exercised that power on September 1st, 2025. The legislative mechanism that allowed it sits in front of every council in the state, which means the question of whether the next council does the same is not a question of capacity, it's a question of timing. If you were choosing one of these 5 towns to build in right now, knowing the full charge, knowing the base build estimate, knowing what the proportional hit looks like relative to each town's median, which one makes financial sense to you and which one doesn't? Write it in the comments. And if this kind of breakdown is useful to you, the numbers behind the planning decisions that don't show up in the listing price, subscribe. There are more of these charges operating quietly inside council boundaries across Queensland, and most buyers encounter them only after they've already